Welcome to Mr. Chalk's Revision Tips. In this video, we will look at the atmosphere, the oxygen in the atmosphere, and carbon dioxide. So there are multiple theories about how the atmosphere evolved, but we think that it started about 4.6 billion years ago. So one theory suggests that during the first billion years of the Earth's existence, there was intense volcanic activities that released gases into the atmosphere which formed the early atmosphere. Right? One of the key things that was ejected into it would be water vapour, which would later condense to form the oceans. So at the start of this period, the Earth's atmosphere would have been much like Mars or Venus today, consisting of mainly carbon dioxide with very little or no oxygen. Volcanoes also produced nitrogen, which gradually built up in the atmosphere, and there may have been small proportions of methane and ammonia. So for the first billion years, things went on like that until it started to cool down. So as water vapour condensed into water, the water started to dissolve gases such as ammonia, removing them from the atmosphere and creating ammonia compounds, amines and other nitrogen containing compounds suitable for life. As plants and algae began to evolve in the ocean, these organisms started to conduct photosynthesis, so the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere decreased and the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere increased. So the plants and algae were acting as a carbon sink. So remember that the reaction that they would carry out would be carbon dioxide reacting it with the water, and that would go and make oxygen and glucose. So oxygen used the carbon compounds formed in seawater to help form their shells, and eventually some of these organisms would go to make up sedimentary rock. So if we just have a look at a very quick question here. So we explain what's happened to most of the water vapour in the Earth's atmosphere. The answer would be something like it's condensed. So as the temperatures went below 100 degrees, which is its boiling point, the water would cool, so would condense, form a liquid and rain to the surface. Other animals evolved on land and began to respire, increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So the evolution of plant life was also important for the development of the atmosphere, because they also carry out photosynthesis, so decrease carbon dioxide levels and increase oxygen levels. So it built up very, very slowly over millions of years to about the 21% figure that we have today, although it has fluctuated. So if we look at this graph clearly shows that atmospheric oxygen levels have increased as time has progressed. So the appearance of oxygen was also important, because without it the development of land animals could not have taken place, right? Because we need oxygen for respiration. Some oxygen also became ozone, which formed the ozone layer, which is important at reducing the amount of UV that reaches the surface. So as plant life developed, a lot of carbon dioxide was absorbed by plants. So after these plants died, their remains would have been turned into coal eventually in some cases. So if we look at how we would describe that, you need to start off by talking about the carbon dioxide was used by plants during photosynthesis. If we were talking about reducing carbon dioxide, you could talk about it being dissolved in the oceans and seas, or being locked up in the skeletons of marine organisms, which would eventually go and form limestone, or could go and form other fossil fuels such as oil or natural gases. Today, nitrogen makes up about 78% of the air we breathe, and it's thought that most of it was initially trapped in chunks of rubble that form the earth. Nitrogen can only be used by living organisms after it has been fixed into relative or reactive compounds such as ammonia or oxides of nitrogen. So you can see from the graph that over time nitrogen levels went up as ammonia levels decreased. So ammonia would be converted into suitable nitrates mainly by nitrifying bacteria, or to a small extent ammonia would directly oxidize into nitrogen gas by the newly formed oxygen. The nitrates are absorbed by plants to form proteins or converted into atmospheric nitrogen by denitrifying bacteria. So if we look at a question on this, so the question might go, the Earth and its atmosphere today are not like the early atmosphere, so describe and explain how the surface of the Earth and its atmosphere have changed from the surface of the Earth in the past to what it would be like today. So these are a few key things that you need to include. You need to talk about oxygen increasing, talk about that happening by photosynthesis, carbon dioxide decreasing because it's being locked up or forming sedimentary rocks after it's been locked up in shells, oceans forming, so water vapor condensing, volcanoes or volcanic action reducing, so they're putting less gas into the atmosphere, and nitrogen forming because ammonia in the Earth's early atmosphere reacted with oxygen or was converted by denitrifying bacteria. So if we look at another question, lots of questions compare the Earth's atmosphere with the atmosphere of Mars, right? And they often do this by showing you a couple of graphs just so you can see the differences. So a question might ask, so the atmosphere of the Earth has much more nitrogen than the early atmosphere. There are other differences between the Earth's early atmosphere and the atmosphere today. Use the bar charts to describe and explain other differences, right? So some of the things that you might want to talk about is carbon dioxide decreasing, the oxygen has increased, talk about photosynthesis, talk about the carbon dioxide dissolving in the ocean or being locked up in rocks or forming carbonates or fossil fuels, talk about the oxygen increasing, and talk about this in terms of photosynthesis.
Thanks for watching.